Spring is here, so let's make my pattern called Rose Garden. Now for this pattern, you will be cutting out quite a few pieces, so do take your time and measure twice and cut once. Now for your print rose fabric, which I am using this bright white print fabric, you will need to cut a bunch of 4.5-inch squares and 2.5-inch by 6.5-inch rectangles. Then for the red background, you will need to cut quite a few 2.5-inch squares and 2.5-inch by 4.5-inch rectangles. Now go ahead and use that chart within the free PDF pattern, which I will have linked down below in the description to inform you how many to cut for the quilt size that you are making. And of course, this pattern is available in 5 quilt sizes: baby, throw, twin, queen, and king. Now first up, go ahead and take a white print 4.5-inch square and 2 red background 2.5-inch squares and place them right sides together on the corners like so. Now you're going to sew them down at a 45-degree line directly down the middle. Now, because these are smaller pieces, you can use that center sewing line on your sewing machine to sew those 45-degree lines. Or if your sewing machine doesn't have that center line, then you can use a fabric marking tool and draw the 45-degree line and then sew directly on top of that line. But once you do so, go ahead and cut a 1/4 inch away from your sew line using either fabric scissors or a rotary blade, and then go ahead and iron everything open. Then all you have to do is repeat this several times until you've made enough for the quilt size that you are making. And I highly recommend that you chain piece everything within this quilt pattern. It will make things much easier in the end. Now, once you have completed the 4.5-inch square blocks, you will have many red backgrounds, 2.5-inch squares left. So next we are going to use them as well as the print 2.5-inch by 6.5-inch rectangle. And you're going to place that 2.5-inch square right sides together on the right side. And once again, sew a 45-degree line down the center, or you can draw the line and sew directly on the line as well, whichever you prefer. And then you're going to cut a 1/4 inch away from that sew line with fabric scissors or a rotary blade and iron it open. Then lastly, you are going to grab a red background 2.5-inch by 4.5-inch rectangle and place it on the left side like so, right sides together, and sew a 45-degree line down the center, the opposite direction. Or you can draw a line and sew directly on the line, once again, whichever you prefer. Now, I personally like to turn my block around and sew it together in this direction on my sewing machine just to make things much easier. But once you've sewn it together, cut that 1/4 inch away from your sew line with fabric scissors or a rotary blade and iron open. Now you will repeat these steps until you've made enough for the quilt size that you are making. And once again, do take your time. We are sewing directly down the center of that 45-degree line. But once all of your pieces are made, it is time to build your quilt block. So go ahead and take 2 of the rectangle units that you just finished making, as well as 2 4.5-inch square units, and place them like so. Then first we are going to sew the 2 4.5-inch squares together, followed by adding the top rectangle, and lastly the bottom rectangle, and you are done. Now I know it doesn't look like much, but wait and see, because once you've made enough quilt blocks for the quilt size you are making, it is time to lay your quilt top out. Now, it might seem hard to believe, but this pattern is built off only one quilt block, and all you'll need to do is rotate the quilt block 90 degrees, and eventually you'll start to see the roses appear. And now you can also finally see how pretty this white print fabric is. But go ahead and lay your quilt out, because once your layout is complete, as always, sew your blocks together to form rows, and then lastly, sew your rows together to complete your quilt top. And here is my quilt top all finished. Now this quilt pattern can be a challenge for beginners because there are a lot of seams to match up, but isn't it gorgeous? Now roses are one of my favorite flowers, and a bunch of them will start to appear and nestle within this quilt pattern. Now as for the backing, I am going to go with the same solid red fabric since I want to keep it simple. And I also wanted to custom quilt this quilt because honestly, it deserves it. But as I was going through my thread stash, I sadly didn't have a red shade that matches or was anywhere close to it. So I was kind of in a little bit of a conundrum and sadly also misplaced my thread color chart. So I ended up going with this gold thread from Glide called Honey Gold because red and gold do look amazing together. You know, Team Gryffindor. And there also is a little bit of gold bits within this white floor background, so it wasn't too out there. But here it is all quilted out. I chose something simple so it wouldn't be too distracting or drawing too much attention away from the piecing of these beautiful roses. And once again, I will have a link down below in the description for the fabrics that I used and the free PDF pattern. Now, if you could please take a moment to hit that like and subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you can be notified for your next amazing quilt project.